Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku returned to stop All for One. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sky over Tokyo wasn't blue anymore. It hadn't been blue for 3 years. It was a bruised, permanent twilight of slate gray and toxic orange, choked by the smog of unchecked fires and the lingering particulate matter of 1,000 collapsed skyscrapers. Katsuki Bakugo, known to the dying world as Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite, adjusted the respirator mask covering the lower half of his face. The air filters hissed, a rhythmic mechanical wheeze that sounded too loud in the silence of the Shinjuku ruins. Clear, he grunted, his voice raspy, transmitted through the comms earpiece to the 3 shadows trailing him. He stepped over a pile of rubble that used to be a vending machine. The plastic was melted, fused with the concrete beneath it. This was Sector 4. No man's land. The border between the resistance-held territory of the Yui fortress and the sprawling, chaotic dominion of the villain alliance. Jiro, Bakugo whispered, not turning his head. His gauntlets, scratched and repainted a dull matte black to reduce reflection, hummed faintly as he flexed his hands. What do you got? Kyoka Jiro, earphone jack, crouched behind a slab of broken highway overpass. She looked different than the girl from the school festival years ago. Her hair was chopped short, uneven, likely done with a combat knife. A jagged scar ran from her left ear down to her jawline. She plugged her jacks into the cracked asphalt, closing her eyes. Vibration is low, she murmured, her voice tight with a permanent headache. Subway tunnels are quiet. No heavy movement within 2 clicks. Just wind. And rats. Rats we can handle, Denki Kaminari whispered. The electric hero stood rear guard. He wasn't the goofball of Class 1A anymore. He wore insulated rubber armor that looked more like a bomb disposal suit, heavy and scarred. His eyes darted constantly to the dark alleyways. Unless they're no rats. Don't jinx it. Shut up, Charge Bolt, Bakugo snapped, though there was no real heat in it. It was just routine. Red, take point with me. We need to hit the pharmacy distribution center and get out before the sun goes down completely. Darkness belongs to them. Aijiro Kirishima stepped up, his red riot armor battered, pieces of the shoulder guards missing and replaced with scrap metal. He gave a silent nod, hardening his skin instinctively as he moved past Bakugo. Got your back. They moved like a single organism. 3 years of guerrilla warfare had stripped away the hesitation of students and replaced it with the cold efficiency of soldiers. They were 20 years old now, but looking at their eyes, you would guess they were 40. They had skipped their youth. They had skipped graduation. They had gone straight from the classroom to the trenches. The city was a graveyard of the old society. They passed a billboard featuring a peeling, faded image of a perfume ad, the model's smiling face slashed by 3 distinct claw marks. Everything here told a story of violence. I hate this sector, Kaminari whispered as they navigated a street clogged with abandoned cars. It feels watched. Stop talking, Bakugo hissed. His mind was a focused storm. He was calculating exit routes, counting the remaining nitroglycerin sweat in his palms, and suppressing the phantom ache in his right knee, a souvenir from a fight with Gigantomachia 6 months ago. But beneath the tactical overlays, the anger simmered. It was always there. A low-level heat that kept him warm in the freezing nights. 3 years. 3 years since the chaotic end of the Dark Deku arc. 3 years since Izuku Midoriya had looked at them, covered in filth and blood, and then simply vanished. They had brought him back to UA initially. They had given him a bath. They had shouted and cried. But the night All for One had begun his total assault on the societal infrastructure, taking down the power grids and the internet, Deku had left again. He had left a note. A stupid, self-sacrificing note about how his presence was a beacon that would get them all killed. Bakugo gripped a piece of rebar jutting out of a wall, heating it until it glowed orange, then let go. Coward, Bakugo thought, the word bitter as bile. You think you're protecting us by leaving us to rot in this hell alone? You think you're the only one who can play hero? They hadn't heard a whisper of him since. Some said he was dead, killed in a ditch somewhere. Some said he fled the country. All Might, now frail and wheelchair-bound within the UA barrier, spent his days staring at the horizon, his soul slowly withering away with his successor's absence. Target ahead, Kirishima signaled, raising a fist. The pharmacy distribution center was a squat, concrete bunker of a building. The front glass was shattered, but the security shutters were down, bent outward as if someone had tried to pry them open and failed. Jack, scan inside, Bakugo ordered. Jiro moved forward, plugging into the shutter. She waited a beat, her brow furrowing. Heartbeats. Faint. Slow. Survivors? Kirishima asked hopefully. No, Jiro pulled her jacks out slowly, her face paling. Too slow. Too rhythmic. Like hibernation. Bakugo felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Ambush. Retreat? Kaminari asked, charging his gauntlets. We need those meds, Bakugo growled. Recovery girl is running on fumes. Sensei Aizawa's infection isn't clearing up. We take the risk. Riot, bust the door. Charge bolt, stun whatever is inside. I'll provide overwatch. Roger. Kirishima took a deep breath, his skin turning jagged and rock-hard. With a roar, he slammed his shoulder into the bent shutter. Metal shrieked, sparks flew, and the barrier crumpled inward. Kaminari didn't hesitate. He thrust his hands into the darkness. Target lock, stun grenade. A flash of yellow electricity illuminated the interior of the warehouse. For a second, the light revealed the horror. Hanging from the ceiling like bats were three creatures. They had the exposed brains and black skin of Nomus, but they were leaner, streamlined. Hyans, and standing in the center of the room, amidst overturned shelves of medicine, was a figure that looked vaguely like a ninja turtle from a nightmare. It was Spinner. But he was massive now, standing nearly 8 feet tall, his scales thick and jagged, drool pooling on the floor. His eyes were glowing red, devoid of the loyalty and camaraderie he once held for Shigaraki. There was only hunger. It's a trap! Jiro screamed. The Hyans dropped. They didn't fall, they accelerated downward. One landed directly on Kirishima before he could recover from his breach. The sound of rock cracking against bone echoed through the street. Yai! Kaminari shouted, unleashing a focused bolt of electricity. The Nomu on top of Kirishima merely twitched, its muscle fibers absorbing the shock. It raised a fist that transformed into a massive bone hammer and brought it down. Kirishima crossed his arms, tanking the blow, but his feet shattered the concrete beneath him. He was being driven into the ground like a nail. Die! Bakugo launched himself into the air, explosions popping from his palms to propel him forward. He spun, generating centrifugal force. Howitzer impact, cluster. The explosion was blinding. A concentrated cone of fire engulfed the doorway, blasting the Nomu off Kirishima. The creature screeched, its skin bubbling, but the regeneration was already kicking in, knitting the burnt flesh back together in seconds. Back! Fall back to the open street! Bakugo roared, landing in a crouch. They're fast! Jiro yelled. She unleashed a sound wave from her leg speakers, heartbeat wall, trying to push back a second Nomu that was scrambling along the walls like a spider. The sound wave hit the creature, disorienting it, but it lashed out with a whip-like tongue, slashing Jiro across the thigh. She cried out, stumbling. Jiro! Kaminari abandoned his position, sliding in front of her. He went fully over his limit. Indiscriminate discharge. 1.5 million volts. The street lit up with blinding white light. The lightning arced wildly, frying the nervous systems of the two lesser Nomus, causing them to convulse and collapse. But the third one, the one Bakugo had blasted, was smarter. It had burrowed underground the moment the light appeared. And then there was Spinner. The massive lizard burst through the concrete wall of the warehouse, ignoring the electricity. He moved with terrifying speed for his size. He swatted Kaminari aside like a fly. The electric hero hit a car hard enough to cave in the door, going limp. Denki! Kirishima roared, charging Spinner. Red Gauntlet! He punched Spinner in the gut. It should have broken ribs. Instead, Spinner barely flinched. He looked down at Kirishima with dead, glassy eyes. Hero! Spinner croaked. His voice was a distorted, wet gurgle. Squash! Hero! Spinner grabbed Kirishima by the head. Let him go, you overgrown gecko! Bakugo screamed. He aimed his gauntlet. AP shot, autocannon. A beam of concentrated explosions drilled into Spinner's shoulder. The lizard roared, dropping Kirishima. Bakugo didn't stop. He flew in, using his explosions to maneuver midair, dancing around Spinner's massive claws. Jiro, get Sparky and get out of here! Bakugo commanded, blasting Spinner in the face to keep him blinded. We're not leaving you! Jiro yelled, trying to drag Kaminari's unconscious body. This isn't a request. It's an order! Bakugo shouted. This guy, he's got multiple quirks. I can feel it. He's not just a lizard anymore. Go! As if to prove him wrong, scales shot out from Spinner's back like projectiles. Bakugo blasted them out of the air, but one grazed his ribs, tearing through his tactical suit and drawing blood. The ground beneath Bakugo exploded. The third high-end, the one that had burrowed, shot up. Bakugo reacted on pure instinct. He blasted downward, but the Nomu grabbed his ankle. Its grip was like a vice. Gotcha, the Nomu hissed. It could speak. Bakugo stared into the creature's exposed brain. Let go! He fired an explosion point-blank at the hand holding him. It severed the fingers, but the Nomu didn't care. It used its other hand to punch Bakugo in the stomach. The air left Bakugo's lungs. He felt ribs snap. He was launched backward, skipping across the asphalt like a stone across water, finally crashing into a pile of rubble. Vision swimming, ringing in his ears. He tasted copper. He tried to push himself up, but his arms shook uncontrollably. Get up, he commanded his body. Get up, you pathetic loser. If you die here, they die. He looked up. The scene was a nightmare. Kirishima was on one knee, bleeding from his scalp, his hardening shattering as Spinner pummeled him repeatedly. Jiro was firing sound waves desperately, trying to keep the regenerating high-end away from Kaminari, but she was exhausted. The intelligent high-end turned its attention to Bakugo. It walked slowly, savoring the moment. Its severed fingers were already regrowing, wriggling like worms. Great explosion, murder god, the Noma mocked, its voice grating. Master wants you alive. But he didn't say, in one piece. Bakugo spat blood. He forced his palms to spark, but they were dry. He had overused his sweat. He was running on empty. Is this it? The thought invaded his mind. After all the training, all the screaming, all the vows to surpass All Might, to die in a gutter in Shinjuku, eaten by a science experiment? He looked at his friends. Kirishima was barely conscious. Kaminari was out. Jiro was crying as she fired her jacks, terrified. No. Bakugo grit his teeth so hard he thought they would crack. He reached into his belt and pulled out a grenade, not a costume prop, a real military-grade explosive he had scavenged. If I go, I'm taking this ugly bastard with me. Hey! Freaksha! Bakugo yelled, forcing himself to stand on trembling legs. The Noma stopped. Yield, eat. Bakugo pulled the pin with his teeth. Shit, he prepared to rush forward. He would hug the bastard and detonate it. It wouldn't kill the Noma, but it would buy Jiro time to run. The Noma lunged. Bakugo braced for the impact, but the impact never came. Suddenly, the air grew heavy. It wasn't just a gust of wind. It was a physical weight, a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure that made Bakugo's ears pop. The dust swirling around the street froze for a microsecond. The birds, the few crows that scavenged the dead city, suddenly took flight, screaming. The Noma froze mid-step, its instincts screaming at it. Even Spinner stopped pounding on Kirishima, his lizard brain sensing a predator far larger than himself. Crocked him. There was no sound of thunder, but the sky split. A streak of lightning tore through the gray smog. But it wasn't blue like Kaminari's, and it wasn't purple like the warp gate. It was green, a viridian scar across the heavens. Something fell from the clouds. It didn't fall like a man, it fell like a meteor. It struck the pavement directly between Bakugo and the high-end Noma. There was no explosion. There was no shockwave that knocked them over. Instead, the energy was perfectly, terrifyingly contained. The asphalt didn't shatter outward. It was simply vaporized in a perfect circle, depressed into the earth by sheer gravitational force. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Dust billowed up, thick and gray, obscuring the figure. Bakugo lowered the grenade, his hand trembling. He knew that feeling. He hadn't felt it in 3 years, but he knew it in his marrow. It was the feeling of being looked down upon. The feeling of chasing a ghost. Through the dust, 2 eyes glowed. Emerald green. Luminous. Angry, the Haiyan Noma shrieked, overcoming its fear. "Who are you?" It launched a barrage of bone spears into the smoke. Dozens of sharp projectiles flying at the speed of sound. Ping. 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 The sound of metal hitting something harder than metal. A tendril of black energy. Black whip, but thicker, pulsing with red veins, shot out of the smoke. It moved faster than Bakugo's eyes could track. It snapped around the Noma's neck. The smoke swirled and dispersed. Standing in the crater was a man. He was taller than Bakugo remembered. Broader in the shoulders. He wore a tattered, heavy cloak that looked like it had been stitched together from the fabric of 100 different hero capes. Underneath, his suit was dark, a deep, forest green, almost black, armored with heavy plating on the shins and chest. His red boots were scuffed, the iron soles reinforced. He wore the cowl, the long rabbit-like ears now lying flat against his head, making him look aerodynamic, lethal. A metal respirator covered his mouth, similar to Bakugo's but sleeker. The Noma clawed at the black whip, strangling it. The figure didn't move his feet. He just twitched a finger. The black whip tightened. With a sickening squelch, the Noma's head was ripped clean off its body. The figure tossed the head aside like trash. A voice said. It was deep. Calm. Devoid of the nervous stutter, devoid of the frantic muttering. It was the voice of a man who had forgotten how to be afraid. Bakugo felt his breath hitch. Spinner roared, abandoning Kirishima. The massive lizard charged the newcomer, brandishing a sword the size of a telephone pole. Die, the figure turned. He didn't dodge. As the sword swung down, the figure raised one hand. Impact, he caught the blade. With one hand, the ground beneath the figure cracked, spider-webbing out for 20 meters. But the figure didn't bend his knees. He held the massive blade, the air shimmering around him with pink energy. F.A. Gene. Spinner, the figure said. There was a hint of sadness in the tone now. You look tired. The figure clenched his fist. The massive steel sword shattered into 1,000 shards. Before Spinner could react, the figure was gone. He moved so fast he was invisible. A blur of green lightning. Smash. A fist connected with Spinner's gut. It wasn't a lethal blow, it was surgical. The air pressure from the punch blasted a hole through the cloud cover above them, revealing a single circle of starry night sky. Spinner's eyes rolled back. The massive mutant crumpled, unconscious before he hit the ground. The remaining 2 Haiyans, recovered from Kaminari's blast, screeched in unison. They recognized the threat now. They combined their attacks, one firing lasers, the other extending blades. The figure didn't look at them. He looked over his shoulder, his eyes locking onto Bakugo. For the first time, Bakugo saw the face beneath the cowl as the figure reached up and pulled the mask down. The freckles were hidden under grime and a jagged scar that ran across the bridge of his nose. His hair was longer, tied back in a messy half-knot. His eyes were tired, ancient, bags heavy under them, but they burned with a calm, terrifying intensity. Check on Kirishima, Izuka Midoriya said. Don't tell me what to do. Bakugo tried to shout, but it came out as a whisper. Midoriya turned back to the charging Nomas. He crouched low. The air around him warped. Gears shifted audibly in the atmosphere. Transmission. He was there, and then he wasn't. Boom. Boom. 2 sonic booms overlapped. Midoriya appeared behind the Nomas. The creatures took another step, then realized they were dead. Their upper torsos slid off their lower bodies. It was a clean separation, done with such velocity that the nerves hadn't registered it yet. Midoriya stood amidst the carnage, steam rising from his shoulders. The green lightning flickered and died out, leaving the street in silence once more. He didn't celebrate. He didn't strike a pose. He just reached into a pouch on his utility belt, pulled out a small device, and tapped it. Threat neutralized in Sector 4, Midoriya said into the device. Prepare Medivac for 3. Serious injuries. He turned around and walked toward Bakugo. The heavy cloak dragged through the dust and Noma blood. Bakugo stood there, the unpinned grenade still in his hand, forgotten. He looked at the boy, the man he had grown up with. The nerd who used to cry if he tripped. The fanboy who wrote notes in a burnt notebook. Now he looked like a warlord. He looked like a ghost. Midoriya stopped 3 feet away. He looked down at the grenade in Bakugo's hand. You should put the pin back in that, Kaken, Midoriya said softly. It's dangerous. Bakugo's hand shook. Rage, relief, confusion, and grief swirled in his chest, creating a cocktail that threatened to make him vomit. Where? Bakugo's voice cracked. He swallowed the blood in his mouth. Where the hell have you been, Deku? Midoriya looked at Kirishima, who was groaning as Jiro tended to him. He looked at the ruined skyline of Tokyo. Then, finally, he met Bakugo's gaze. He didn't smile. That was the worst part. He used to smile at everything. I was looking for a way to end it, Midoriya said. He reached out and gently took the grenade from Bakugo's frozen fingers, effortlessly repinning it with his thumb. And? Bakugo demanded, stepping closer, ignoring his broken ribs. Did you find it? Midoriya looked north, toward the towering spire that rose in the distance, the headquarters of All for One. Yeah, Midoriya whispered, his eyes darkening. I found him. He placed a hand on Bakugo's shoulder. The grip was firm, grounding. I'm sorry I'm late. Bakugo wanted to punch him. He wanted to scream. He wanted to blast him into the next prefecture for leaving them alone in the dark for 3 years. But as his legs finally gave out and he collapsed, it wasn't the ground that caught him. It was Deku. I've got you, Midoriya said, hoisting Bakugo up as easily as if he were a child. As consciousness faded, Bakugo looked at the green lightning crackling faintly around Midoriya's collar. The symbol is back, Bakugo thought, the darkness taking him. But he's not the symbol of peace anymore. He's the symbol of war. The command center of the UA fortress smelled of stale coffee, ozone, and fear. It had once been Class 1C, a place of general studies and low-stakes adolescence. Now, the desks had been pushed together to form a massive tactical table, covered in holographic maps that flickered with the unstable power grid. The windows were boarded up with reinforced titanium plating, leaving the room in a perpetual, artificial twilight illuminated by the blue glow of monitors. Ochako Uraraka stood at the head of the table. At 20 years old, the roundness of her face, the bubbly cheeks that had earned her nicknames in a past life, had hollowed out. Her eyes, once warm and brown, were hard, constantly scanning the streams of data scrolling across the main screen. She wore her hero suit, but it was modified, heavier padding, scuffed armor plating, and a utility belt loaded with medical suppression foam and grappling cables. She wasn't just Uravity anymore. She was the logistics commander for the resistance. Sector 4 feed is down, said Henta Ciro from a console to her left. The tape hero looked exhausted, his elbows resting on the desk, bandaged fingers flying over a keyboard. Bakugo's squad went dark 3 minutes ago. Last transmission was a bioscience spike from Spinner. Ochako gripped the edge of the table. Her knuckles turned white. Try the backup frequency. Jiro should have a subvocal line open. I'm trying, Ciro said, frustration leaking into his voice. The atmospheric interference is too high. Something is ionizing the air over Shinjuku. It's messing with the comms. Is it AFO? Asked Tsuyu Ajiri. She sat perched on a high stool, her posture tense. She had returned from a reconnaissance mission in the sewers only an hour ago, still smelling of damp earth. Did he find them? If he did. Ochako didn't finish the sentence. They all knew. If All for One found a squad, that squad didn't come back. Or worse, they came back as Nomus. Ochako looked at the digital map. A red blinking light marked Bakugo's last known position. Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite. He was their strongest heavy hitter, the spearhead of the resistance. If Bakugo fell, morale would collapse. And more importantly, he was her friend. He was one of the few left who remembered before. Wait, Ciro said, his voice jumping an octave. I'm picking up a seismic event. Explosion? Ochako asked. No, Ciro shook his head, eyes widening as he stared at the wave patterns. Implosion. Pressure drop. It's massive. It's registering like a localized hurricane, but it appeared out of nowhere. A weather manipulation quirk? Tsuya asked. It's too concentrated, Ciro said. Then, the color drained from his face. Ochako, look at the energy signature. Ochako leaned over his shoulder. The sensors were picking up the electromagnetic residue of the event. Most quirks had a signature, a specific wavelength of radiation or heat. Bakugo's was chaotic and hot. Todoroki's was a dual wave. The signature on the screen was green. It spiked off the charts, burying the needles in the red, then vanished as quickly as it appeared. Ochako felt her heart stop. She felt the blood rush in her ears, drowning out the hum of the servers. She knew that color. She knew that energy. She had felt it hum against her skin when she floated him. She had seen it break his bones 100 times, but it was impossible. Is that? Suyu whispered, her hand covering her mouth. Verify it, Ochako ordered. Her voice was shaking, but she clamped down on it. Ciro, verify the ID. I can't, Ciro stammered. The database. It's practically ancient history. But the wavelength matches the records from 3 years ago. 99.8% match. Ochako didn't wait. She spun around, grabbing her helmet from the rack. Uraraka, wait! Ciro yelled. You can't just go out there. If it's a trap. It's not a trap, Ochako said, her voice ringing with a certainty she hadn't felt in years. She fastened the helmet, the visor snapping shut. Tsu, get the medical transport. We're going to Sector 4, Ochako-chan. If that signal is real, Ochako said, turning back to them, her eyes wet behind the glass, then we aren't just rescuing a squad. We're rescuing hope. The ride to Sector 4 was a blur of gray concrete and anxiety. Ochako drove the armored personnel carrier APC, a heavy, 6-wheeled beast scavenged from the remains of the self-defense force. Tsuyu manned the turret gun on the roof. The streets of Tokyo were a labyrinth of destruction. Entire blocks had been leveled. Nature was reclaiming the ruins. Vines choked the skeletons of office buildings, and packs of wild dogs roamed the intersections. Ochako drove with aggressive precision, drifting the heavy tank around craters. Her mind, however, was miles away. 3 years. He had left a letter. That was it. A crumpled piece of notebook paper on his pillow in the hospital wing. I'm a danger to you all. As long as I'm here, he will come for me, and he will hurt you to get to me. I have to go. Don't look for me. Please stay safe. I'll be watching. Izuku, she had screamed when she read it. She had floated every piece of furniture in the common room in a fit of grief and rage. How dare he? How dare he decide for them? They were heroes too. They had fought wars together. And he had decided, in his infinite, sacrificial stupidity, that he had to bear the weight of the world alone. They had tried to track him. Bakugo had rampaged through the underworld for months, beating info out of villains. Todoroki had used his father's agency resources. But Izuku Midoriya had simply ceased to exist. The dark Deku period had been frightening, but this total disappearance was a void. And now, green lightning, approaching target zone, Tsuyu's voice came through the comms, tight and professional. Visuals are, ribbit. Ochako, you need to see this. Ochako slammed on the brakes. The APC skidded to a halt, kicking up a cloud of dust. She popped the hatch and climbed out, activating her gravity boots to float lightly to the ground. The silence hit her first. Sector 4 was usually noisy with the groans of settling buildings and the distant shrieks of low-level nomas. Now, it was dead silent. The street in front of the pharmacy warehouse was a graveyard. Ochako walked forward, her boots crunching on glass. She saw the bodies of 2 Heian nomas. They hadn't just been defeated, they had been dismantled. One was headless, the cauterized wound smoking. The other had been bisected cleanly at the waist. Then she saw Spinner. The massive, mutated lizard lay in a crater, unconscious, his massive sword shattered into pieces that littered the road like confetti. Over here! Tsuyu called out. Ochako ran toward the voice. Behind a pile of rubble, she found them. Kirishima was sitting against the wall, his face a mask of blood, his arm bent at a wrong angle. Jiro was slumped next to him, clutching her bleeding leg, her eyes wide and shell-shocked. Kaminari was unconscious, his head in Jiro's lap, and standing over them was a figure. He was facing away from her. He was kneeling, wrapping a bandage around Bakugo's chest. Bakugo was out cold, his breathing shallow. The figure wore a cloak that looked like a shroud of shadows and dust. It was tattered at the hem, stained with mud and oil. Underneath, the suit was dark green, reinforced with dull metal plating that looked hand-forged. Ochako stopped 10 feet away. Her breath caught in her throat. The figure tied the knot on the bandage with practiced, efficient movements. Then, slowly, he stood up. He was huge. The boy she remembered had been muscular, yes, but this. The shoulders were broader, the back wider. He stood with a stillness that was unnatural. He turned around. Ochako felt the world tilt. It was him. But it wasn't him. The face was Izuku Midoriya's, but stripped of all softness. His jaw was set in a hard line. A scar, white and jagged, ran from his left temple across the bridge of his nose to his right cheekbone, a permanent mark of some battle they had never seen. His hair was longer, pulled back into a messy knot, with loose strands framing his face. But it was the eyes that broke her heart. Those emerald eyes, which used to overflow with tears at the slightest provocation, were dry. They were deep, dark pools of exhaustion. They looked like the eyes of a soldier who had seen too much death to ever be surprised by it again. He looked at her. There was no spark of recognition, no blush, no stammering. He just assessed her. Threat level 0. Ally confirmed. Uraraka-san, he said. His voice was a deep rasp, like stones grinding together. Ochako opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to slap him. She wanted to hug him until he cracked. Deku-kun? She finally whispered. He didn't smile. He looked down at Bakugo. He has 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, and severe quirk exhaustion. Kirishima has a compound fracture. Kaminari has a concussion. We need to move them. Now. He bent down and picked up Bakugo. He didn't struggle. He lifted the explosive hero, who weighed nearly 200 pounds in gear, as if he were a rag doll. Wait, Ochako stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached out. Izuku, you're here. He paused. For a split second, the mask slipped. His eyes flickered toward her hand, and a spasm of pain crossed his face, not physical pain, but something deeper. A longing. Then, the wall slammed back up. The patrol routes for the Nomus will reset in 4 minutes, he said, stepping past her toward the APC. If we aren't mobile by then, we'll be pinned down by air support. He walked past her. He actually walked past her. Ochako stood there, hand outstretched, grasping at empty air. The smell of him lingered, ozone, rain, and old blood. Ochako-chan, Tsuyu said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. Let's go. We have to go. Ochako swallowed the lump in her throat. She forced her face into the mask of the commander. Right, she said, her voice hard. Load them up. The interior of the APC was cramped and dim, lit only by the red emergency lights running along the floor. The engine roared as they tore back through the ruins, bumping over debris. Ochako sat near the rear doors, watching him. Izuku sat on the bench opposite her. He hadn't taken a seat. He crouched, balancing perfectly despite the rocking of the vehicle, his eyes fixed on the small slit of the viewport window. He was scanning the horizon. Jiro was awake, staring at Izuku with a mixture of awe and terror. Kirishima was drifting in and out of consciousness, muttering about manliness. Kaminari and Bakugo were secured on the stretchers. So, Jiro whispered, her voice raspy. It's really you. You're not a hallucination from blood loss? Izuku didn't turn his head. No. Where were you? Jiro asked, tears welling in her eyes. 3 years, Midoriya. 3 years. Overseas, Izuku said. His answers were short. Tactical. America. Europe. Southeast Asia. Doing what? Hunting, he said. The word hung in the air, heavy and cold. Ochako studied him. His gloves were worn down to the lining. The iron soles of his boots were rusted. He looked like he hadn't slept in a bed in 1,000 nights. Why did you come back now? Ochako asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched in her lap. Izuku finally turned his head. In the red light, he looked demonic. The shadows exaggerated the scars and the hollowness of his cheeks. Because I found it, he said. Found what? His body, Izuku said. The real one. Not the projections. Not the puppets. I found where Shigaraki and All for One are merging. The APC hit a pothole, jarring everyone. Izuku didn't sway an inch. It's a trap, you know, Ochako said. If you found him, it's because he wanted you to find him. I know, Izuku said. He looked at his hands. The scars on them were different now. Thicker. But he's impatient. And he's scared. Scared? Tsuyu asked from the driver's seat. AFO doesn't get scared. He does, Izuku murmured, almost to himself. He's scared of the ghosts. Before anyone could ask what that meant, the APC lurched violently to the left. Metal screeched against metal. Contact! Tsuyu yelled. Right flank. Scavengers! They have a jury-rigged cannon. A boom echoed, and the side of the APC buckled inward. They're trying to flip us! Ochako shouted. She unbuckled, ready to float the vehicle if it tipped. Tsuyu, evasive maneuvers. I can't shake them. They have harpoons. Stay inside, Izuku said. He didn't shout. He didn't ask for permission. He stood up. Izuku, wait! Ochako yelled. We can handle this. He ignored her. He reached for the rear hatch handle. Maintain course and speed. I'll catch up. You can't just. He opened the hatch. The wind roared into the cabin, carrying dust and noise. Izuku looked at her one last time. Keep them safe, Uraraka. Then he jumped. Ochako scrambled to the rear window, peering out into the swirling dust. 3 heavily modified dune buggies were chasing them, manned by villains in spiked armor. They had harpoons attached to the APC's bumper, dragging them back. Izuku landed on the road, rolling once and coming up into a sprint. He wasn't running away from the buggies. He was running at them, and he was fast. Ochako watched, mesmerized. He didn't use a flashy smash. He didn't scream. Pink energy crackled around his body, F.A. Jean. He moved like a blur. He reached the first buggy. He didn't punch the driver. He grabbed the front axle of the speeding vehicle with one hand. With a sudden, impossible shift in momentum, he jerked the axle upward. The buggy flipped end over end, crashing into the ruins. The other 2 buggies swerved, their gunners opening fire. Bullets sprayed around him. Izuku didn't dodge. He weaved. He moved with such minimal effort, shifting his torso just inches to let the bullets pass. It was like watching water flow around a stone. Black whip erupted from his back, not the unruly tendrils of the past, but focused, sharp spears of darkness. They shot out, piercing the engine blocks of the remaining 2 buggies instantly. The vehicles died, coasting to a halt. Izuku stood amidst the wreckage. He didn't kill the villains. He just immobilized them, stripping them of their ability to pursue. He looked at the retreating APC. Then, he crouched. Crocked him. He launched himself into the air, a green comet trailing behind the transport. Ochako slumped back against the wall of the APC. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. He was strong. Stronger than All Might ever was in his prime. But it was a terrifying strength. It was surgical. It was lonely. Did you see that? Jiro whispered, shivering. He didn't even use 10% of his power. It was quiet. Yeah, Ochako whispered, closing her eyes. Too quiet. The sun had set completely by the time they reached the UA fortress. UA High School was no longer a campus. It was a citadel. The 4 iconic towers were encased in a shimmering, hexagonal energy barrier, powered by the school's generators and amplified by the quirks of the support course students. The grounds were a maze of trenches, automated turrets, and refugee camps. Thousands of civilians lived in the shelter of the barrier. The safe zone. The APC rumbled up to the main gate, a massive blast door built into the barrier wall. Identification, a robotic voice boomed. Logistics Commander Uravity, Ochako said into the comms. Returning with Alpha Squad. Code, plus Ultra. Scanning. The laser grid swept over the vehicle. Access granted? Welcome home. The blast doors groaned open. As they drove through the refugee sector, people stopped to watch. The APC was battered, smoking. People whispered, pointing. They looked tired, hungry, and scared. The vehicle pulled up to the triage bay of the main building. Medical teams were already waiting, alerted by Ochako's call. The rear doors opened. The medics rushed in. "We have 3 critical. Get the stretchers." Ochako hopped out, directing the flow. "Bakugo goes to trauma 1. Kirishima needs orthopedic surgery immediately. Get Kaminari on a neuroscan." In the chaos of shouting nurses and flashing lights, Izuku stepped out of the vehicle. The reaction was instantaneous. A hush fell over the loading dock. A young nurse dropped a tray of instruments. A veteran hero, Tiger of the Pussycats, missing an eye, stopped dead in his tracks. Izuku stood there, the green lightning of his arrival long gone, just a man in a dirty cloak. He looked at the school, his school. He looked at the logo on the wall. He looked like a ghost haunting his own grave. "Midoriya?" someone whispered. Then, the whispers spread. "It's him. It's Deku. He's back." "Is that really him?" Izuku shrank slightly under the gaze. He pulled his cowl lower. He looked ready to bolt. "Don't you dare," Ochako said. She was standing right in front of him. She had blocked his exit path. "I need to." Izuku gestured vaguely toward the darkness outside the bay. "I should do a perimeter check. Ensure we weren't followed." "The sensors are clear," Ochako said, stepping closer. "You aren't going anywhere. Uraraka, my presence here, it compromises the barrier. He can sense one for all. Being here puts the refugees in danger. They are already in danger." Ochako snapped. Her voice cracked, echoing in the silent bay. "They have been in danger every single day you were gone. Do you think you leaving stopped him? It just made us easier to kill." Izuku flinched as if she had struck him. I thought if I drew his fire." "You thought you could be a martyr," Ochako said, tears finally spilling over. She didn't wipe them away. She marched up to him until she was inches from his chest. She had to look up to meet his eyes now. "Look at me, Izuku." He hesitated, then slowly lowered his gaze. "We didn't need a martyr," she hissed, grabbing the lapels of his armored suit. The fabric was rough, cold. "We needed our friend. We needed you." Izuku's lip trembled. The stoic mask cracked. The warlord faded, and for a second, the boy was there. "I was scared," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I was so scared that if I stayed, I'd see you die." "I couldn't watch you die, Ochako, so you let us think you were dead instead?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, carrying the weight of the world, looking utterly defeated by a girl with 0 gravity. "You're back now," Ochako said, tightening her grip. "And you are not leaving this building until you look everyone in the eye and tell them why you left. You owe us that." Izuku closed his eyes. He took a deep, shuddering breath. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, good." Ochako let go of him, smoothing her suit. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Now go to the infirmary. Recovery girl is waiting." "And Izuku?" He looked at her. "You look terrible." A faint ghost of a smile touched his lips. It didn't reach his eyes, but it was there. "I've been told. Go." He walked toward the medical bay doors. The crowd parted for him, staring with a mix of awe and suspicion. Ochako watched him go. She felt exhausted, drained down to her marrow. But as she watched the green-clad figure disappear into the hallways of UA, she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. The crushing weight on her shoulders felt a little bit lighter. She tapped her comms. "Command," she said. "Get me a line to All Might's quarters." "Uravity?" Ciro's voice came back. "Is it true? Is he there?" "Yeah," Ochako said, looking at the empty space where he had stood. "The ghost is back." Inside the sterile white hallway of the infirmary, Izuku walked alone. The lights were too bright. The air was too clean. It smelled of antiseptic, not ash. It made his skin crawl. He passed a window. He saw his reflection. A stranger stared back. A scarred, weary stranger wearing a hero's costume like a shroud. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, tattered photograph. It was the one from the mall years ago. Class 1A smiling, eating crepes. He ran his thumb over the faces. Bakugo's scowl. Uraraka's laugh. Ida's stiff posture. "I'm back," he whispered to the photo. But as he put it away, he felt the hum of one for all deep in his chest. The vestiges were restless. The first user, Yoichi, was whispering in the back of his mind. It's time, ninth. Izuku clenched his fist. The green sparks danced between his fingers, silent and deadly. He had lied to Uraraka. He hadn't come back just to save them. He had come back to die. He just hoped he could take all for one with him before his friends realized the truth. He pushed open the doors to the main ward. At the end of the room, sitting in a wheelchair by the window, was a skeletal figure with sunken eyes and wild blonde hair. Toshinori Yagi turned his head. The two symbols of peace, the fallen one and the broken one, locked eyes. Young Midoriya, All Might breathed, his voice barely a whisper. Izuku lowered his head, the shame burning hotter than any quirk. I'm home, All Might. The air in the private wing of the UA infirmary was different from the rest of the fortress. Outside, the air smelled of ozone, unwashed bodies, and the copper tang of anxiety. Here, it smelled of lemon antiseptic and fading lilies. Izuku Midoriya stood by the window. The glass was reinforced, crisscrossed with wire mesh, distorting the view of the refugee camp below. He could see the tents, patches of blue tarp and gray canvas huddled together under the protective dome of the barrier. He saw fires burning in oil drums. He saw children playing with scrap metal. He didn't see hope. He saw a cage. You've gotten taller, my boy. The voice was dry, brittle like autumn leaves. Izuku turned. Sitting in the wheelchair, wrapped in a yellow blanket that looked too large for him, was Toshinori Yagi. All Might. The former symbol of peace looked like a skeleton that had forgotten to stop breathing. His cheeks were sunken caverns, his eyes deep in their sockets. The vibrant blonde hair was thinning, dull and gray at the roots. But the blue eyes still held that same piercing, desperate warmth. Izuku felt a lump form in his throat, a stone of guilt so heavy he thought it might choke him. And you, Izuku whispered, his voice rough, you've gotten thinner. Toshinori chuckled. It turned into a cough that rattled his thin chest. He waved a skeletal hand, dismissing the concern. Occupational hazard of retirement. The body rests, and the atrophy sets in. But, I am not the one we should be looking at. Toshinori wheeled himself closer. The electric motor of the chair whirred softly in the silence. He stopped inches from Izuku, reaching out a trembling hand. Izuku knelt. He didn't bow. He collapsed to one knee, bringing himself to eye level. He let his mentor's hand touch his face. The fingers were cold, papery. They traced the jagged scar that ran across Izuku's nose, then moved to the heavy bags under his eyes. 3 years, Toshinori murmured. 3 years of silence. I thought. I feared the one for all fire had gone out. I couldn't call, Izuku said, his voice cracking. He stared at the floor tiles. If I used the comms, he would have triangulated the signal. If I sent a letter, he would have intercepted it. I had to be a ghost, All Might. I had to disappear so he would stop looking at UA and start looking at the shadows. Did it work? Toshinori asked softly. Did he look away? Izuku closed his eyes. No. He remembered the nights in Shanghai. The ambush in the sewers of Paris. The constant, gnawing pressure of AFO's search and destroy teams. He looked, Izuku admitted. But he never stopped squeezing Japan. I thought if I left, I'd draw the poison out with me. But I was arrogant. The poison is the root. He doesn't care about the world, All Might. He only cares about the game he's playing with you. And now with me. Toshinori sighed, his hand dropping to his lap. We miss you, Izuku. Not the hero. The boy. I miss you. That broke him. The warlord persona, the cold efficiency he had built up over 1,000 days of solitude, fractured. Izuku rested his forehead against the armrest of the wheelchair. He didn't cry. He had forgotten how to cry somewhere in the ruins of a Nevada desert. But his shoulders shook. I'm sorry, Izuku whispered. I'm so sorry I left you alone. You didn't leave me alone, Toshinori said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old strength. You left me with them. He gestured vaguely toward the door. They are waiting for you, you know. Class A. The faculty. They aren't the children you left behind. Izuku stood up, wiping his face with his scarred hand. He adjusted the heavy green cloak, the armor plates shifting with a metallic clink. I know. I saw Bakugo. I saw Uraraka. They're soldiers now. War does that, Tashinori said sadly. Go to them. They need to see the ghost is flesh and blood. They need to know why. Izuku nodded. He turned to the door, his hand hovering over the handle. Izuku, Tashinori called out. Izuku looked back. Do not try to save them by pushing them away again, All Might said, his eyes burning with a sudden, fierce intensity. That was my mistake. Don't let it be yours. The walk to the faculty meeting room felt like a march to the gallows. Yue had changed. The wide, bright corridors were lined with crates of supplies. The walls were scuffed, covered in flyers for rationing schedules and patrol shifts. Students, kids who should be worrying about exams and festivals, walked past him in tactical gear, carrying support items that looked more like weapons. They stopped when they saw him. He was a legend to the first years. The ninth user. The rogue. The one who vanished. They stared at his back, at the tattered green cape, at the menacing aura that seemed to dampen the sound in the hallway. He could hear their whispers. Is that him? He looked scary. I heard he killed a high-end with one punch. I heard he abandoned us. Izuku kept his eyes forward. The vestiges were loud in his head. They judge what they do not understand, the second user, Kudo, said, his voice sharp. Ignore them. Focus on the mission. They are scared. Ninth, Nana Shimura's voice was softer, maternal. Be kind. Kindness gets you killed, the second retorted. Silence, the first user Yoichi commanded. We are here. Izuku stopped in front of a set of double doors. The sign, Class 1A, had been taped over. Someone had written War Room in black marker. He took a breath. He centered the storm of energy inside him, the swirling vortex of Black Whip, the tension of FA Gene, the volatility of Gear's shift. He locked it all down. He pushed the doors open. The room fell silent. It wasn't a classroom anymore. The desks had been pushed together into a massive rectangle in the center of the room. Maps, holographic projectors, and stacks of files covered every inch of surface. The windows were boarded up, leaving the room in a perpetual gloom lit by harsh LED strips, and around the table sat the ghosts of his youth. Tenya Ida stood at the head of the table. He wore his armor, but the helmet was off. His glasses were cracked at the bridge, taped together. His jaw was set, his posture rigid. Shoto Todoroki sat to his right. His hair was longer, the red and white strands matted. The burn scar on his face seemed to stand out more violently against his pale skin. He was sharpening a combat knife, the rhythmic SHHHK sound stopping the moment Izuku entered. Momo Yayorozu. Fumikage Tokoyami. Mina Ashido. Tsuyu Adri. Hanta Siro. And in the corner, leaning against the wall with his arm in a sling and his ribs taped, was Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku stepped into the room. The door clicked shut behind him. For a long 10 seconds, nobody spoke. The air was thick enough to choke on. So, Shoto said. His voice was flat, cold. The prodigal son returns. Izuku walked to the empty end of the table. He didn't sit. He stood, his hands resting on the back of a chair. He felt 12 pairs of eyes drilling into him. Hello, everyone, Izuku said. Hello? The chair screeched against the floor. Tenya Ida stood up so fast he knocked his file over. 3 years, Midoriya. Ida's voice boomed, shaking with a rage Izuku had never heard from the class representative. 1,095 days. And you walk in here and say hello? Ida-kun, calm down, Momo said softly, though her eyes remained fixed on Izuku, unreadable. I will not calm down. Ida chopped his hand through the air, but the robotic precision was gone. It was just a frantic, angry gesture. Do you have any idea what we went through? Do you have any idea what it was like to hold the line while the symbol of hope vanished off the face of the earth? I didn't vanish, Izuku said quietly. I was working. Working? Bakugo scoffed from the corner. Is that what you call it? While we were burying Midnight's replacement? While we were scraping civilians out of collapsed subways? You were working? I was drawing the fire, Izuku said. He kept his voice level, though his heart was hammering. If I stayed, AFO would have leveled UA within a week. You weren't ready. And who decided that? Ida demanded. You. Since when do you make the decisions for all of us? We are a team. We are heroes. I'm not a hero anymore, Izuku said. The words hung in the air. Excuse me? Mina asked, her voice small. Izuku looked at his hands. He pulled the glove off his right hand. The skin was a map of scars, twisted and gnarled, darker than the rest of his arm. The scars from the war, and the scars from the last 3 years. Heroes save people, Izuku said. Heroes inspire. I am a weapon. That's what I became. That's what One for All needed to become to stop him. He looked up, meeting their eyes one by one. I went to America first, he began. The vestiges pulled the memory to the surface. Flashback. The Grand Canyon. Night. The wind howling. Izuku sat cross-legged on a cliff edge. He wasn't wearing a shirt. His back was covered in bruises. He was vibrating. The fourth user, Shinomori, was screaming in his head. Danger. 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 Izuku ignored it. He was trying to force gear's shift to engage without somatic movement. He was trying to control the laws of inertia with his mind. Again, he muttered. A drone, a Stark Industry combat droid he had salvaged, hovered in front of him. It fired a laser. Izuku didn't move. He shifted the gear of the air molecules in front of him. The air became solid as steel. The laser refracted. Then, the recoil hit him. He coughed blood. He fell over, gasping. He did this for 3 months. Alone. Eating MREs and hunting rabbits. Then the cities. New York. London. Paris. He hunted the brokers. The people supplying AFO with tech. He broke into a safe house in Berlin. He didn't ask them to surrender. He used Black Whip to tear the room apart until they talked. He remembered the look in the villain's eyes. It wasn't fear of a hero. It was fear of a monster. You're not All Might, the villain had spat. No, Izuku had replied, stepping on the man's chest. I'm the ghost that comes after him. End flashback. I dismantled his international supply lines, Izuku told the room. I destroyed the factories in China that were making the Nomad chips. I hunted down the doctor's backup labs in Brazil. I made myself a target so big, so loud, that AFO had to send his best after me. I fought 6 Hyants in the Andes. I fought a regiment of Tartarus escapees in Seattle. He gripped the chair. I did it so he would stretch his forces thin. I did it so you guys would have a chance to breathe. To get stronger. We didn't want to breathe, Shoto said, standing up slowly. He walked over to the window, peering through a crack in the boards. We wanted to fight beside you. You would have died, Izuku said bluntly. That's arrogant, Deku, Bakugo growled. It's a fact. Izuku snapped. The controls slipped. The green lightning sparked around his collar, causing the lights in the room to flicker. Do you know what he is now? He isn't just a man with quirks. He's a singularity. When I fought him in the mental plane, it's like staring into a black hole. If you get too close without the resistance of One for All, your mind breaks. He doesn't just steal quirks anymore. He steals will. He took a deep breath, reining the power back in. I couldn't watch you become mindless dolls. I couldn't. Silence returned. But the anger in the room had shifted. It wasn't gone, but it was complicated now by the horror of what he was describing. So Momo spoke up, her voice analytical, grounding them. You returned. Does that mean the strategy has changed? Yes, Izuku said. Why now? Ochako Uraraka spoke for the first time since they entered. She was sitting near the front, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked furious. Why come back today? Why not last month? Why not next year? Izuku looked at her. He reached into his belt pouch. He pulled out a small, crystalline drive. It glowed with a faint purple light. Because I found the key, Izuku said. And because I'm running out of time. Running out of time? Tsuya asked. Are you dying? We all are, Izuku evaded. He placed the drive on the tactical table. Yayorozu, can you interface with this? It's encrypted, but it's not digital code. It's quirk-based encryption. Momo frowned, touching the drive. She created a specialized reader from her arm. I can try. The hologram projector flickered. A static-filled image appeared in the air above the table. It was a map of Tokyo. But it was layered with complex heat signatures and void spaces. What are we looking at? Ciro asked. This, Izuku pointed to a dark void in the center of the map. Right over the ruins of the Minato ward is the void spire. We know about the spire, Bakugo said. It's AFO's throne. It's surrounded by a quirk nullification field and guarded by Makia. We can't get within 5 clicks of it. That's not just a throne, Izuku said. It's a cocoon. A cocoon? Shigaraki and all for one, Izuku explained. They've been merging for 3 years. AFO is trying to completely overwrite Tenko Shimura's consciousness. But the process, it stalled. Stalled? Shoto asked. Why? Because Tenko is fighting back, Izuku said. The room murmured. Shigaraki is a monster, Ida said. He's killed thousands. You think there's still something to save? I know there is, Izuku said firmly. Because I heard him. In the vestige world. When I was in Brazil meditating. I heard a voice crying. It wasn't AFO. It was a child. He tapped the map. The merger is at 98%. Once it hits 100%, Tenko is gone. AFO becomes a god. He will have complete control over the decay, complete control over every quirk he's stolen, and no mental resistance. He will expand the decay wave across the entire country. So we have to kill him before he hits 100%, Bakugo said. No, Izuku said. We have to break the shell. He looked around the table. I can't get to him alone. The spire is protected by a barrier that reacts to one for all. If I approach it solo, it hardens. It becomes impenetrable. But if the barrier is overwhelmed by multiple disparate quirk signatures at once, it fractures. He looked at his friends. I didn't come back just to say hello. I came back because I can't end this without you. I need Class 1A. The weight of the request settled on them. He was asking them to march into the heart of hell. You have some nerve, Uraraka said quietly. Izuku flinched. She stood up. She didn't look at the map. She looked at him. You leave for 3 years. You ignore us. You try to die alone. And then you waltz back in and tell us you need us to be your battering ram? Uraraka-san, Shut up, Deku, she said, but her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was sad. You still don't get it. She walked around the table. She stopped in front of him. We aren't angry because you didn't use our quirks, she said. We're angry because you didn't trust our hearts. She reached out and took his gloved hand. She squeezed it. You're the 9th user, she said. You have all these ghosts in your head. Nana Shimura, All Might, they were all self-sacrificing idiots too. But we aren't ghosts, Izuku. We're right here. She looked at the class. Hands up, she commanded. Who is willing to punch a hole in hell for this idiot? Bakugo snorted. He raised his good hand. Obviously. Someone has to make sure he doesn't trip. Kirishima, who had just been wheeled into the back of the room in a wheelchair, raised a fist weakly. Manly duty. Shoto raised his hand. I have a score to settle with Dabi. If he's at the spire, I'm going. Ida adjusted his glasses. He sighed, a long, resigned sound. Then, he raised his hand. As class representative, I cannot allow you to proceed unsupervised. One by one, every hand in the room went up. Izuku felt his vision blur. The vestiges were silent now. Even the second user had nothing to say. You guys. Izuku choked out. Don't cry, Bakugo warned. If you cry, I'm blowing up the table. Izuku sniffed, forcing a smile. It was a broken, jagged thing, but it was real. I won't cry. Good, Momo said, clapping her hands together, shifting instantly back into commander mode. Then let's get to work. If we are going to breach the Void Spire, we need a plan. Midoriya, what is the layout of the inner sanctum? Izuku wiped his eyes and leaned over the table. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't looking at a map alone. Okay, Izuku said, pointing to the hologram. Here's how we're going to win. Later that night, the strategy session had lasted for hours. The plan was complex, dangerous, and insane. It relied on precise timing and quirks pushed to their absolute limits. The room had cleared out. Only Izuku remained, staring at the glowing map of the spire. The door creaked open. It was Bakugo. He wasn't wearing his hero costume anymore, just sweatpants and bandages wrapping his torso. He limped over to the table and stood next to Izuku. You're lying, Bakugo said. Izuku didn't look up. About what? About the plan, Bakugo said. You told everyone that we're going to break the shell so you can pull Shigaraki out. You told them we're going to save him. We are, Izuku said. Bullshit, Bakugo spat. I know you, Deku. I know that look in your eyes. I saw it when we fought at the ground beta. I saw it when you left. Bakugo leaned in close, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You aren't planning to come back from that spire, are you? Izuku finally looked at him. The green eyes were dull, resigned. One for all has grown too strong, Kaken, Izuku whispered. It's past the singularity point. My body, it's breaking down. Not from damage, but from existence. I'm burning up from the inside. He pulled down the collar of his suit. Bakugo's eyes widened. The skin around Izuku's neck and collarbone was cracked, glowing with faint, spiderweb veins of green light. It looked like a ceramic vase about to shatter. The power is too much for a human vessel, Izuku said. Even a quirkless one. I have maybe a month. If I don't transfer this power or destroy it, I'll explode. And I'll take half of Japan with me. So what? Bakugo asked, his voice shaking. You're just gonna use yourself as a bomb? I'm going to transfer it, Izuku said. To Shigaraki. What? I'm going to force one for all into him, Izuku explained calmly. His body is already unstable. If I force the transfer, the clash between AFO and OFA inside one vessel, it will destroy the quirks. Both of them. It will wipe the slate clean. And what happens to you? Bakugo demanded. If you give it away? Do you just become quirkless again? Do you get to retire? Izuku smiled. It was a sad, gentle smile. If I transfer the core, my life force goes with it. The embers won't be enough to sustain the damage my body has taken over the years. Without OFA holding me together. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Bakugo grabbed Izuku's collar. No. No way in hell. We find another way. There is no other way, Kaken, Izuku said. This is the end of the story. The 9th user finishes it. I won't let you, Bakugo hissed, tears pricking his eyes. I didn't spend 3 years fighting in the mud just to watch you kill yourself. You won't have to watch, Izuku said. Because you'll be leading the others to safety. Don't you dare. Kaken, Izuku interrupted. He put his hand over Bakugo's hand on his collar. Please. Let me be the hero this time. Let me save you. Bakugo stared at him. He saw the resolve. He saw the inevitability of it. It was written in every scar on Izuku's face. Bakugo slowly let go. He stepped back. You're a bastard, Izuku, Bakugo whispered. I know, Izuku said. If we survive this, Bakugo said, turning his back, I'm never forgiving you. I know, Izuku repeated to the empty room as Bakugo walked out. Izuku looked back at the map. The void spire pulsed with a dark light. One last smash, he whispered to the ghosts in his head. One last smash, Nana Shimura agreed. Izuku turned off the hologram, plunging the room into darkness. The sun rose over the Yui fortress, but it didn't bring warmth. It brought clarity to the devastation. Shoto Todoroki stood on the precipice of the Heights Alliance dorms, or what was left of them. The building had been reinforced with layers of scrap metal and concrete, turning the once modern living space into a bunker. He held a cup of steaming tea in his hands, but he wasn't drinking it. He was letting the heat seep into his palms, contrasting with the freezing cold that permanently resided in his right side. 3 years. In 3 years, Shoto had grown. He was taller now, his frame filled out with dense muscle honed by malnutrition and constant combat. His hair was longer, the red and white strands tied back in a severe ponytail to keep them out of his eyes during a firefight. The burn scar over his left eye seemed more prominent now, a map of his history that matched the ruined landscape stretching out before him. He wasn't just Shoto anymore. To the refugees huddled in the gymnasiums, he was the Frostfire Lord. It was a stupid name, something the media would have eaten up in the old days, but now it was just a call sign on a radio frequency. He took a sip of the bitter tea. He's back. The thought still felt foreign, like a stone in his shoe. Izuku Midoriya. The ghost. Shoto had been angry yesterday. When Midoriya had walked into the war room, looking like a specter wrapped in green rags, Shoto had felt a flare of rage hot enough to rival his father's prominence burn. Abandonment was a trigger for a Todoroki. To be left behind, To be deemed not enough to share the burden, it cut deep. But beneath the anger, there was something else. Relief? No. It was simpler than that. It was the return of gravity. For 3 years, they had been floating in a void, desperate for a center. Now, the sun was back, even if it was scarred and dim. You're brooding, a voice said. Shoto didn't turn. He knew the heavy, rhythmic footsteps. I'm thinking, Ida. Tenya Ida stepped up beside him. The class representative, now the field commander of the Alpha Squad, looked weary. His glasses were taped at the bridge. His armor was scuffed, the engines on his calves hissing softly as they cooled down from a dawn patrol. About the plan? Ida asked, leaning against the railing. About the odds, Shoto corrected. And about him. Midoriya has changed, Ida said, polishing his glasses with a dirty cloth. He's quiet. Efficient. It's like looking at a weapon that remembers being a human. He had to become that, Shoto said, looking at the steam rising from his cup. To survive out there alone. My father used to try to turn me into a masterpiece. Izuku turned himself into a warhead. Do you trust the strategy? Ida asked. Shoto looked toward the north, where the dark clouds swirled perpetually over the ruins of the Minato ward. Somewhere in that darkness was Dabi. His brother. Tuya. The strategy relies on 3 people breaking a fortress that an army couldn't scratch, Shoto said. It's insanity. He crushed the paper cup in his hand, flash freezing the tea into a jagged lump of ice. But it's the only play we have left. All for One is close to the final merger. If we don't move now, there won't be a world left to save. Then we move, Ida said, adjusting his glasses. Briefing is in 10 minutes. Don't be late. Ida walked away, his engines whirring. Shoto stayed for a moment longer, watching the ice in his hand melt against his scars. The war room was buzzing with a frantic energy that hadn't existed 24 hours ago. For years, the resistance had been reactive. They put out fires, they rescued survivors, they held the line. Today, they were planning an offensive. The shift in morale was palpable. People were moving faster, speaking louder. In the center of the room, the holographic map of Tokyo glowed blue. Izuku Midoriya stood at the head of the table. He had shed the tattered cloak. He was wearing a modified version of his suit, the Zeta suit, the support team called it. It was darker, the green muted to near black. The armor plating on his shins and chest was heavy, scarred from impacts that would have pulverized a tank. His arms were wrapped in compression bandages under his gauntlets. He looked tired. But his eyes were sharp, tracking every person who entered the room. All right, Izuku said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter instantly. Let's begin. Shoto took his place next to Bakugo. The explosive hero was leaning back in his chair, feet on the table, spinning a small knife between his fingers. But Shoto noticed Bakugo's eyes weren't relaxed. They were locked on Izuku, analyzing, calculating. The objective is the Void Spire, Izuku said, pointing to the massive dark structure projected in the center of the map. Intelligence suggests that Shigaraki, or the entity that is currently piloting his body, is in the cocoon stage within the spire's apex. He is undergoing the final biological rewrite to accommodate the totality of all for one's quirk factors. We know this, Momo Yaorosa said from her console. But we also know the spire is surrounded by a kinetic barrier. We threw a cruise missile at it last year. It didn't even scratch the paint. That barrier, Izuku explained, is a derivative of a quirk AFO stole from a hero in Europe. It's called Reflect. It absorbs kinetic energy and redirects it. The harder you hit it, the harder it hits back. So we can't punch our way in, Kirishima said, looking at his hardened fist. That sucks. Not exactly, Izuku corrected. The barrier has a limit. It processes impact based on a single vector. It can stop a missile. It can stop a smash. But it cannot process multiple, high-yield impacts occurring at simultaneous, discordant frequencies. Izuku tapped the console. The map split into 2 distinct paths. This is Operation Tartarus Breaker. He pointed to a massive industrial complex 5 miles south of the spire. Phase 1, the Andal, Izuku said. The main force of the resistance, Class 1A, the remaining pros, and the volunteer militia, will assault the Noma production facility here. This factory is the power source for the spire's localized grid. It's also where the Hyents are incubating. You want us to kick the hornet's nest, Jiro summarized. I want you to burn the nest down, Izuku said grimly. If you cut the power, the spire's regeneration capabilities drop by 40%. But more importantly, AFO is arrogant. If he sees an army marching on his factory, he will send his elite guard to crush it. He will empty the spire to slaughter you. The room went silent. It was a grim request. Be the bait. Be the distraction. We can handle the elites, Ida said firmly. We've held them off before. Phase 2, the hammer, Izuku continued, ignoring the tension. He pointed to the spire itself. While the anvil draws the heat, a small strike team infiltrates the spire from the upper atmosphere. We breach the barrier, enter the throne room, and neutralize Shigaraki. Who is the strike team? Siro asked. Izuku looked up. Me. Bakugo. Todoroki. Murmurs broke out across the room. Just 3? Uraraka asked, frowning. Izuku, that's suicide. Even if the elites are gone, the spire itself is a death trap. And Shigaraki. The barrier requires 3 specific energy signatures to overload, Izuku lied. Shoto caught it. It was a smooth lie, but a lie nonetheless. Bakugo's explosions provide the concussive force. Todoroki's thermodynamics weaken the molecular bonds of the shield. And I provide the piercing blow. Why not take more backup? Sato asked. Tokoemi could. Speed, Izuku cut him off. Once we breach, we have minutes before AFO realizes it's a feint and recalls his guards. We need to move faster than sound. We need to be vertical. Dark Shadow is strong, but in the harsh light of the spire's defenses, he's vulnerable. I need raw propulsion. Bakugo stopped spinning his knife. He stabbed it into the table. He means he needs people who don't slow him down, Bakugo growled. He looked at the class. Don't take it personally, extras. The nerd is moving at Mach speeds now. If you can't fly, you're just luggage. That's harsh, Bakugo, Tsuyu said. It's war, Bakugo retorted. Shoto studied the map. The logic held up. But there was something else. Izuku was keeping the strike team small not just for speed, but to minimize casualties. He expected the spire to be a one-way trip. I'm in, Shoto said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. If the elites are deployed to the factory, that leaves Dabi at the spire. He won't leave Shigaraki's side. He's waiting for me. He is, Izuku confirmed. The intel places Dabi as the Praetorian Guard of the Inner Sanctum. Along with Toga and whatever is left of Makia. Gigantomachia is there? Mina Ashido paled. He's dormant, Izuku said. Buried in the foundation. We have to pray he stays asleep. Izuku looked around the room. I know I'm asking you to bleed for a plan you didn't write. I know I don't have the right to lead you after being gone so long. But this is the only way to save the country. We break the factory. We break the spire. We end the era of all for one. Momo stood up. She smoothed her uniform. We'll take the factory, she said, her eyes hard. We'll draw every Nomu in the city to us. You 3 just make sure you don't miss. We won't, Izuku said. Meeting adjourned, Ida announced. Prep time is 1 hour. Move out. As the room dissolved into chaos, Izuku remained at the table. Shoto walked up to him, Bakugo trailing behind. Midoriya, Shoto said. Izuku looked up. Todoroki-kun. You're holding back, Shoto said. About the barrier. You don't need us to break it. You could break it yourself if you went 100%. Izuku hesitated. Then he nodded. I could. But if I use 100% to break the door, I won't have anything left for the fight inside. And I can't do what comes next alone. Saving him? Shoto asked. Yeah, we need to verify that, Bakugo interrupted. He stepped between them, his face inches from Izuku's. You talk a big game, Deku. You say you're faster. You say you're stronger. But I haven't seen you fight in 3 years. I'm not following a rust bucket into hell. What do you want, Kakin? Izuku asked wearily. Jim Gamma, Bakugo snarled. 10 minutes. Full cowling. No holding back. We launch in an hour, Izuku argued. We should save our stamina. If we can't sync up now, we die in the spire, Bakugo countered. We need to know if we can still move as a unit. Or did you forget how to play team sports while you were playing Vigilante? Izuku stared at him. Then, a spark of the old rivalry lit up his eyes. Fine, Izuku said. 10 minutes. Jim Gamma looked like the surface of the moon. It was a concrete wasteland of pillars, pipes, and varying elevations. The roof was partially collapsed, letting shafts of dusty sunlight pierce the gloom. Shoto stood on a high girder, watching. He wasn't just a spectator. He was the variable. Down below, Izuku and Bakugo stood 50 meters apart. Bakugo cracked his neck. He wasn't wearing his gauntlets, too lethal for sparring, but his hands were smoking. The nitroglycerin sweat was potent. Don't think I'm gonna go easy on you because you look like a hobo, Bakugo shouted. Izuku settled into a stance. It was different from before. Lower. More grounded. His arms hung loose, not rigid. The green lightning began to flicker around him, but it was silent. No buzzing, just pure energy containment. Ready when you are, Kakin. Bakugo didn't wait. Boom, he was gone. An explosion behind his back propelled him forward at bullet speed. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, swinging a right hook wreathed in fire. Izuku didn't block. He sidestepped. A movement so minimal it looked like he phased through the punch. Bakugo spun midair, using the momentum of the mist to trigger a second blast from his left hand. Stun grenade. The flash blinded the area, but Izuku wasn't there. Above you, Shoto whispered to himself. Izuku was on the ceiling. He was using Black Whip not to swing, but to adhere, like a spider. He launched himself down. Detroit smash. 20%. The air pressure slammed Bakugo into the ground, cracking the concrete. But Bakugo rolled with the impact, laughing. Too slow. Bakugo yelled. He pointed his palms at the ground. Maximum output. Tornado. He spun, creating a vortex of explosions that engulfed the area. It was a zone denial attack. Izuku landed in the center of the fire. Shoto watched closely. How would he handle the heat? Izuku took a deep breath. The pink energy of FA gene stored up in his legs. Then, the sound changed. It wasn't a whoosh or a bang. It was the sound of a transmission shifting gears in a Formula One car. A high-pitched mechanical whine that resonated in Shoto's teeth. Transmission, second gear. Izuku vanished. The explosion vortex dispersed because the object in the center moved faster than the shockwave could expand. Izuku appeared behind Bakugo. He tapped Bakugo's shoulder. Bakugo whirled around, eyes wide. He blasted point blank. Izuku was gone again. Third gear. He was a blur. He was bouncing off the pillars, the walls, the floor. He was moving so fast that there appeared to be 5 of him at once. The afterimage technique, but real. Bakugo was firing wildly, his instincts screaming. He couldn't track him. Todoroki! Bakugo roared. Wake up! Shoto dropped. He didn't hold back. He activated his left side. Flash fire fist, jet burn. A massive wave of white-hot fire swept across the gym, intercepting Izuku's path. Izuku didn't stop. He ran through the fire. The air pressure around his body was so intense it pushed the flames aside. He lunged for Shoto. Shoto switched instantly. Heaven-piercing ice wall. A glacier erupted from the floor. Izuku punched the ice. But he didn't just break it. The shockwave traveled through the ice, shattering the glacier into snow instantly. He burst through the white powder, his fist stopping an inch from Shoto's nose. The wind from the punch blew Shoto's hair back, unraveling his ponytail. Silence. Izuku was breathing heavily, steam rising from his skin. His skin was flushed red. Fast, Shoto noted, not flinching. Too fast, Bakugo said, landing beside them. He looked pissed, but there was a gleam of respect in his eyes. You're cheating, nerd? You're ignoring inertia. Gear shift, Izuku wheezed, clutching his chest. The cost of the quirk was evident. His heart rate was skyrocketing. It alters the speed of the target. I use it on myself. I can ignore the laws of acceleration. You're hurting yourself, Shoto observed. He saw the tremor in Izuku's hand. Your body can't keep up with your mind. It doesn't have to keep up for long, Izuku said, straightening up. Just long enough to reach the throne. Bakugo walked up to Izuku and punched him in the arm. Hard. Ow, Izuku muttered. That's for showing off, Bakugo grunted. But okay. You haven't gone soft. You're just insane. Can we sink? Izuku asked. We can, Shoto said. He ignited a small flame in his left hand and formed a shard of ice in his right. Bakugo provides the chaos. You provide the speed. I provide the control. The Three Musketeers formation. Don't call it that, Bakugo snapped. We're the murder squad. Work in progress, Shoto said dryly. Izuku looked at them. For a moment, the war-torn veteran disappeared, and the awkward teenager resurfaced. Thank you, Izuku said. For, still being here. Shut up, Bakugo turned away. We aren't doing it for you. We're doing it because we live here. Right, Izuku smiled. 1 hour later. The launch bay. The transport choppers were revving their engines. The noise was deafening. Team Alpha was loading up. Momo, Ida, Kirishima, Uraraka, they were all in full gear, checking weapons and quirks. Shoto stood by the edge of the helipad with Bakugo and Izuku. They weren't taking a chopper. They were taking a heavily modified stealth jet, the Icarus, piloted by Hawks, who was currently grounded but could fly a plane. Izuku was tightening the straps on his gauntlets. He looked nervous. Hey, Shoto said. Izuku looked up. Back in the room, Shoto said quietly, so only the three of them could hear. You said you needed us to help save his heart. Shigaraki's. Izuku nodded. The vestige. Tenko. He's buried under layers of hatred and AFO's control. I can reach him, but I can't pull him out alone. AFO's will is too strong. He'll crush me mentally. And that's where we come in? You and Kaken, you're my anchors, Izuku admitted. When I go into the vestige world, I lose track of the physical one. If my body gets destroyed while my mind is away, it's over. And I need emotional resonance. Emotional resonance? Bakugo scoffed. Sounds like hippie crap. Tenko hates heroes, Izuku said. He hates the society that ignored him. But he doesn't know you. He doesn't know that heroes can change. He thinks we're all fake. If he sees us, not All Might, but us, fighting not to kill him, but to stop his pain, maybe that cracks the shell. Shoto looked at his own hands. He thought of Dabi. He thought of the brother he had failed to save, the brother who burned with hatred. I understand, Shoto said. It's not about forgiveness. It's about acknowledgement. Exactly, Izuku said. Heroes don't just win, Bakugo muttered, reciting the old lesson they had learned the hard way. They save. He looked at Izuku. If you get lost in that head of yours, Deku, I'm blasting you out. Got it? Got it, Izuku said. Midoriya. Bakugo. Todoroki. It was All Might. He had wheeled himself out to the tarmac. The wind whipped his oversized yellow suit. The three of them walked over. Tashinori looked up at them. He looked at Bakugo, fierce and explosive. He looked at Shoto, cold fire and resolve. He looked at Izuku, his legacy, his burden. I have no words of wisdom left, All Might said, his voice thick with emotion. You have all surpassed me long ago. He raised a shaky fist. Just come back. Please. Izuku gripped All Might's hand. We will. We're the class of 1A. Let's go. Bakugo yelled, heading for the jet. I'm not waiting for the apocalypse. Shoto followed. He felt a strange sense of calm. The fear was there, yes. The knowledge that he might die in the next hour was real. But he wasn't alone. He climbed into the jet. Izuku followed, pausing at the door to look back at the Yui fortress one last time. Then the hatch closed. The Icarus engines roared to life. Operation Tartarus Breaker is a go. Hawk's voice crackled over the comms. Buckle up, kids. It's gonna be a bumpy ride. The jet shot into the sky, banking hard toward the north. Toward the darkness. Shoto looked out the window. The ground fell away. He activated his phosphorescent fire, his left side glowing with a cold, ethereal light. Wait for me, Tuya, Shoto thought. We're finally ending this. Beside him, Izuku closed his eyes and began to hum the rhythm of the gear's shift. First gear, engage. The war for tomorrow had begun.